The Juneau World Affairs Council presents Spy Pilot, Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 Incident, and a Controversial Cold War Legacy with Francis Gary Powers, Jr. In 1960, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union, sparking a major Cold War international incident. Gary's father was the pilot, and his talk aims to set the record straight about the U-2 incident and his father's reputation. Francis Gary Powers, Jr. is an author, historian, and international speaker. His books, Letters from a Soviet Prison, Spy Pilot, and Enemy Territory, tell the stories of the U-2 incident and his father.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. It's great to be in Juneau. This is my second time to Alaska. My first time was in 2009 during the 50th anniversary. I visited Anchorage. But I'm on a cruise with my family, and this is one of the stops. So this is a great venue to give a lecture. So thank you all very much for coming out to join me for about an hour to talk about Cold War history. They mentioned 3 of the books that I've written. I've actually written 7 or 8 now. The first one, Letters from a Soviet Prison. During my research to find out about my father, I uncovered 85 of his letters to and from his family, as well as the journal that he kept while in prison. So I thought it was very important for the historical record to have his written words, his thoughts, his feelings, his hopes, his despairs, what it's like to be in a Soviet prison during the middle of the Cold War. So this is a primary source. The second book that I wrote, after 35 years of research and 5 years to write the book, is tonight's talk, Spy Pilot, Francis Gary Powers, the U-2 Incident, and a Controversial Cold War Legacy. I helped to take Dad's reputation from infamy and controversy back in the 60s to that of an American hero today. As a result of my research, my father was posthumously awarded the POW Medal in 2000 and the Silver Star in 2012. And the third book, dealing with my dad, Enemy Territory, which is a graphic novel, a comic book to teach younger kids, students, about this part of Cold War history. I also have other books available, including a graphic novel on the Berlin airlift, a book on the sites around the country that need to be preserved for Cold War history, and a few others like Cold War Virginia and Cold War California. I'm currently working on Cold War Florida, and eventually I will get to Cold War Alaska. So I'm going to show a quick video, about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, that'll set the stage for today's talk. It's the film clip, the clip from the movie Bridge of Spies that came out in 2015, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Tom Hanks as James Donovan, the attorney who brokers the exchange between my father and Soviet spy Rudolph Abel in 1962.
You've been selected for a mission which you are not to discuss with anyone outside of this room. We are engaged in a war with the Soviet Union. This war does not, for the moment, involve men at arms. It involves information.
Something important has come up.
We've got a Soviet spy.
But there's a wrinkle.
They got our spy pilot. Or the head full of classified information. The Russians want their man back before he cracks. We want you to negotiate the swap.
I'm an insurance lawyer. I'm not sure I want to pick that up.
Are you good at what you do?
This will be a first for the both of us.
You should be careful.
I'm talking to you about the security of your country.
Why aren't we hanging him? He's a spy!
You're asking me to violate the Constitution.
Do you know how people will look at us? The family of a man trying to free a traitor?
Everyone deserves a defense. Every person matters. Where do they want this negotiation?
East Berlin.
Just tell me that you're not going to be in any danger. I don't even care if it's the truth. Give me something to hold on to.
We need to have the conversation our governments can't.
People in my country consider this an act of war.
You can call it what you want. Let's be clear, nobody is safe.
We're in a battle for civilization.
The Constitution, it's what makes us Americans. Shouldn't we show our enemies who we are?
Things have started to fall apart.
Is this your position or your government's?
Is there any outcome here where I'm not either detained or shot?
Do we need to worry about you?
What's the move when you don't know what the game is?
The next mistake our countries make could be the last one.
Give me one moment to switch out to the other. All right. So here we have the U-2 spy plane, built in 1955, operational in 1956, built by Kelly Johnson, the head of Skunk Works, Lockheed Skunk Works out of Burbank Airport in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles back in that time period. The poster for Bridge of Spies, starring Tom Hanks, came out in 2015. I actually was a consultant on the film, did a little cameo in it. If you'd like to watch the film, you can get used copies of the DVDs or Blu-ray off of eBay. You can also find it on the Netflix and Showtimes and some of the streaming services. Now, when I'm growing up in Southern California, I'm aware that my father was shot down over the Soviet Union, imprisoned by the KGB, and ultimately exchanged for a Soviet spy in 1962. But as a kid, growing up in this family, we talked about what Dad went through. I was aware of it. So my perception as a young kid is that everybody's dad went through something like this, being shot down, imprisoned, and exchanged. That changed in August of 1977. I'm 12 years old. August 1st, my father dies in a helicopter crash while working for NBC television. I come home with my mom to a house full of people. They inform us of the bad news. Our lives are turned upside down. I become very introverted. I don't understand why people will ask me questions about my father. I'm aware of what he went through, but they're asking me things like, why did he do this? Or why didn't he do that? So I didn't know the answers. So in high school, I did not want to talk about it. In college, I came out of my shell. I was curious. I wanted to find out more about my father. I wanted to find out why there were controversies about him, why there were conspiracy theories about him. I wanted to find out the truth of what he went through. That way I would be able to answer questions being asked of me. So in college, I go to the library and I discover for the first time that Dad's on the cover of Time magazine in 1960 as a result of being shot down over the Soviet Union. So here I am, 20 years old, 1985, finding out for the first time that Dad's on the cover of Time magazine. So now I'm really curious. What other magazines talk about him? What other books have been written about him? What other periodicals and newspaper articles, what do they say about him? What is the truth of what he went through? So I start to do this research. My father was born August 17th, 1929 in Southwest Virginia, a little place called Pound, Virginia, right on the Kentucky border. He's one of 6 children. He's the second oldest. He's got 5 sisters. His dad is a coal miner, works the coal fields in Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. They have a family farm where he's being raised. His father also owns a shoe shop where he fixes the miners' shoes on the weekends after they come out of the mines. So my father's growing up in the height of the Depression, 1929 to 1939. He is the first of his family to go to college. He goes to Milligan College in Tennessee, graduates in 1950, and immediately enlists in the U.S. Air Force. He is wanting to become a pilot. He's had this passion to be a pilot ever since a very young age of about 10 to 12 years old, where he got his first ride in a Piper Cub at a country fair in Princeton, West Virginia. And from that moment on, he was hooked. He wanted to fly, and now this is an opportunity for him to do that by going into the military. He gets his wings in 1952. He's a F-84 pilot, flying F-84s out of Turner Air Force Base near Albany, Georgia. There between 1952 and 1956, he's getting proficient in flying the F-84. In May of '56, my father is recruited by the CIA to fly the U-2 spy plane. He is trained to fly the plane in Nevada at Area 51. After about 2 months of training, he and his U-2 squadron ship off to Incirlik Air Force Base near Adana, Turkey. My father in this photo is on the far left, standing up in the back row. There are 12 pilots in this photo. This is the B squadron. There are the A, the B, and the C squadron, the first 3 squadrons of the CIA U-2 pilots. They're stationed all around the perimeter of the former Soviet Union. After 4 years of successful missions, my father has flown 27 successful missions, some over Russia, other missions over China, Tibet, India, Pakistan, Middle Eastern countries, Eastern European countries. So after 4 years, he's one of the pilots with the most number of hours in the airplane, the most experience flying the aircraft. He's selected for the May 1st, 1960 mission. This mission will take off from Peshawar, Pakistan. It'll fly some 3,000 miles north. Will land in Bodø, Norway. Should take about 9 hours to fly after a successful mission. My father gets up very early on May 1st, 1960, gets into his pressure suit, breathes pure oxygen for about 1 hour before takeoff. The reason that the U-2 pilots will breathe pure oxygen is to get the nitrogen bubbles out of the bloodstream. If they don't do that, they could get something similar to the bends. So they have to take this precaution prior to a flight. He also goes through his mission briefing, finds out what targets to overfly. He gets in the airplane's cockpit, takes off at 9 a.m., crosses over the Soviet's border, starts to flip on and off the camera switches that will take the photographic imagery of the ground below. He's 4 hours into his mission, altitude of 70,500 feet over the city of Sverdlovsk. There's a bright orange flash, a shockwave hits the plane, pushes the plane forward, throws my father back in his seat. My father realizes something's gone wrong. The controls no longer respond. You can't fly a plane without a tail section. The near miss of a Soviet SA-2 missile has exploded near enough to the tail section to cause structural failure. As a result, the nose of the plane pitches forward, the wings snap off, the fuselage goes into an inverted spin, tumbling out of the sky. My father falls in the wreckage from 70,500 feet to about 30,000 feet before bailing out of the airplane. He does not use the ejection seat. If he did, in the position he's in, he would sever his legs on the way out. The U-2 cockpit is very small, very tight, very compact. In order to eject, you have to be in a perfect position or you could lose a limb. Realizing this, my dad does the following. He starts to panic. He forces himself to maintain composure, take some deep breaths, relax, think his way through this situation. Oh, I don't have to eject, I can crawl out. So immediately he opens up the canopy, which floats off into space, undoes his harness, and is sucked up halfway out of the cockpit. He's still connected by his air hose, 2 or 3 feet of air hose, being banged around, can no longer reach the destruct button, can no longer see it. His faceplate has frosted over. He can't see past his nose. He does realize he's getting closer and closer to the ground. He's able to break free of the air hose, falls free of the airplane. His parachute opens automatically at 15,000 feet, and he parachutes down to the ground. On the way down, he takes off his faceplate, surveys the countryside. The closer he gets to the ground, the more he notices a dark car following his descent. He lands on the outskirts of a collective farm. The farmers are working the fields. The kids, they're off school. It's a holiday, May Day in Russia, so they're helping the parents tend to the crops in the field. They see this commotion. The pilot lands. They rush up to him. They help him with his backpack, his helmet, his parachute, start to ask him questions in Russian. They think he's one of theirs. Well, Dad shrugs his shoulders. He doesn't speak Russian. This makes one of the farmers a little nervous. Who is this guy? Falls out of the sky, doesn't speak our language. About that time, a black car shows up, 2 men get out, put him in the back seat, and they take him to a holding area in the central part of town. There for the next few hours, someone speaks broken English. They're trying to communicate with them. Who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing here? To which Dad would reply, my name's Gary Powers. I am lost. I had a mechanical malfunction. Can you take me to the American Embassy? No, that is not permitted. Can you take me to the American Red Cross? No, that is not permitted. And this is how it went the first few hours of his capture. Later that afternoon, early evening, KGB guards from Moscow show up. They take him by armed guard and airplane to Moscow's airport and then shuttle him over to Lubyanka prison. Lubyanka is the infamous KGB prison, part of and adjacent to the KGB headquarters in downtown Moscow. So this is where my father finds himself, his first night of captivity on May 1st of 1960. For the next 5 days, the Soviets say nothing about this shootdown. Then, May 5th, Khrushchev comes up to center stage, very gleefully announces to the world, "Ah, comrades, we've shot down an American spy plane." But Khrushchev intentionally makes no reference as to the fate of the pilot. The Eisenhower administration, thinking that the pilot had died in the crash, or certainly Khrushchev would have paraded him around as evidence, they authorized the release of a cover story that an unarmed weather research plane may have accidentally strayed across the border after the pilot had radioed trouble with his oxygen equipment. Once that cover story is in place, a few days go by. On or about May 7th, May 10th of 1960, Khrushchev comes back up to center stage, another press conference, releases this photograph of the U-2 wreckage. He claims at this time that they've shot down not only the plane, but have also captured the pilot, Francis Gary Powers, who's quite alive and kicking and was confessed to spying for the CIA. Well, Eisenhower's in a little bit of a dilemma. He's just been caught lying to the world public. The very first time a US president was caught lying to the public was Eisenhower with the U-2 incident. Eisenhower is now doing damage control. He's trying to figure out how to save his presidential legacy. People within the CIA are advising him, fire Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA. Let him be the scapegoat, the fall guy. Let him take the blame for this rogue operation that was not successful. But Eisenhower realizes that if he does that and fires or blames a subordinate, that public opinion will think that he as president is not in control of his own country. So instead, Eisenhower holds his own press conference, comes up to center stage. He takes full responsibility for his actions. He calls his actions, quote unquote, a vital but distasteful necessity in order to avert another Pearl Harbor. And while all this is unfolding, Dad's been stuck in a Russian prison cell going through the interrogations. Press, international press, front page headlines. U-2 shot down, summit conference in jeopardy. These are the type of headlines that are being written around the world. There's a Paris summit conference that's being planned for May 16th of that year between Britain, France, the US, and the Soviet Union. Another photo of Khrushchev holding up evidence of my dad's espionage activities. This is a sleeve of gold coins. The U-2 pilots were given gold coins, gold rings, gold watches, American dollars, Soviet rubles, things to try to barter or bribe their way to freedom. My father shot down 1,300 miles within the Soviet Union. He can't use any of this material to get to a border. The KGB released this photograph of my father. They put him back in his flight suit, put the helmet back on to show that he's alive and well in captivity. Now I can tell by my father's expression that he is not happy in this photo. One other photo of him in captivity wearing the overalls that go over the pressure suit, again to show the world that he's alive and well in Soviet custody. Khrushchev at the time is very upset. He was in America in 1959, guest of the Eisenhowers. He appears before the United Nations in May of 60, complains about these U-2 overflights of his country. This photo is supposedly where he's supposed to bang his shoe on the podium. I talked to Sergei Khrushchev, his son. He and I were friends up until his passing a few years ago. I asked him about his dad's shoe. We'd like the shoe for the Cold War Museum. He looks at me and he basically says, Gary, it's a shoe. You wear them, they wear out, you throw them away. So a piece of history is in the garbage. That's just sad. But he also tells me that his shoe, his dad, never banged his shoe on the podium. So if anybody can find me a photograph of Khrushchev banging a shoe, please let me know. It's instilled in me that he banged his shoe on the podium, but I can't find any evidence of it, and Khrushchev's son said it didn't happen. Who are you going to believe? So, at the time, the Paris Summit Conference happens, May 16th of 1960. France, Britain, America, and the Soviet Union, Khrushchev and Eisenhower, they attend. Khrushchev stands up, demands an Eisenhower apology. Eisenhower refuses. Khrushchev berades President Eisenhower, storms out of the Paris Summit Conference, and it looks as if the Cold War is about to get hot. And while all this is unfolding, Dad's been stuck in the Russian prison cell going through the interrogations. The first week, he's lying to his captors outright, holding back as much information as possible, trying to mislead them any way he can. But on about May 10th, international headlines around the world. Summit conference in jeopardy, Eisenhower caught line, and these are the type of headlines that are starting to appear. So the KGB guard in charge of the interrogations, on or about May 10th, copy of the New York Times, rushes into the interrogation chamber, shoves the newspaper in Dad's face, yells at him, "You've lied to us. You told us you were trained in Arizona. Well, the New York Times says you were trained in Nevada at Area 51. You might as well tell us everything. We'll get it out of your American press anyways." So Dad is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he tells the full truth, he's giving away secrets. If he lies to him and gets caught, he can get shot, face the death penalty for espionage. So for the next 3 months of solitary confinement, interrogations, he does the following. He tells the full truth when he knows they can verify the information in the press. That gives him credibility. He lies to him outright when he knows there's no way they can find out the answer. Names of pilots, number of missions, specifications about the equipment on board the plane. And he gives a part truth, a part lie, dances around the subject when he knows that they know something about the question they're asking, but not enough to contradict his answer, such as the altitude he was flying. My father always maintained he was at the maximum altitude of 68,000 feet when he was shot down. And he used that figure for 2 reasons. First, close enough to be believable, yet far enough away to keep other planes, other pilots out of harm's way. U-2s would fly between 70 and 75,000 feet on operational missions. My father wanted to convince the Soviets to explode their warhead at 68,000 feet, the maximum altitude, so that there'd be a 2,000 to 7,000 foot buffer between where the planes were flying and where the missiles would explode. So my father's interrogated for 3 months in Lubyanka. At the end of 3 months of interrogations, he's put on trial at the Hall of Columns in downtown Moscow. So this is a photo of Dad in the docket on the right-hand side of the stage, standing up, defense counsel in front of him, 3 military judges, a military tribunal, and the prosecutor on the left-hand side of the stage. International audience, VIPs, dignitaries, and press in attendance. At the end of 3 days, between August 17th and August 19th, my father's here waiting to hear the verdict. After 3 days of the trial, the verdict, 10 years in prison. One of the things I want to mention about the gentleman in the glasses, the defense counsel on the left side of the screen. Not once during the trial did he object to any question asked of my father. In the Soviet Union, you are guilty until proven innocent, unlike here, where we are innocent until proven guilty. The switch of those 2 words makes all the difference in a democratic versus a communist society. Front page headline, August 20th, Powers gets a 10-year sentence. On the left-hand side of the stage, space capsule is caught on re-entry from orbit. The Americans are boasting and bragging about their technological advances. We can capture a payload from outer space. The Soviets can't do that. We're winning the space race. What they don't tell, what the US government doesn't reveal in this article, is what the payload is. The first successful film from a spy satellite, Corona. August 17th, it comes back into Earth's orbit. It's captured by a plane with the net in the back. After the pod is ejected from outer space, it comes through, the parachute opens, the plane flies over top of it, grabs the parachute, hauls the pod up into the cargo bay. It's taken to NPIC, National Photographic Interpretive Center in Washington, D.C., the precursor to the National Reconnaissance Office in Chantilly, Virginia. So this is a photo of them capturing a pod from outer space. And I just find it amazing that Dad's trial is on one side and the Corona spy satellite is on the other in 1960 of August. Now, my father, after his trial, he's sentenced to 10 years in prison. He's shifted over to Vladimir Prison. Vladimir Prison is 3 hours by plane from Moscow. At this facility, he has a cellmate, Zergard Krimish, a Latvian. The Latvian is brilliant. He's a grandmaster at chess. He speaks 5 or 6 languages fluently. He actually teaches Dad to play chess in the Soviet prison, something to pass the time. Now, my dad had never played chess before. He's played checkers, he's played poker, he's probably rolled the dice in Vegas. He just had never played chess. So he learns in a few weeks how to play chess with his cellmate. Once he can put the pieces together, once he can do the moves, knows a little bit of the strategy, he can play a game, Zergard does the following. He sets up the chessboard, he turns around, he blindfolds himself, and he still beats Dad at chess. Brilliant guy. My father's thinking, wow, this guy's really smart. I bet he can remember everything I say. I think he could be a plant. And we do think he was a plant. He got caught smuggling goods and people in and out of Latvia working for the British, cops a deal with the Soviets, a lighter sentence, an earlier release, something to that effect, to squeal or stool on fellow prisoners, one of which was my father. No concrete evidence that I found, but it does make sense, and if you read between the lines, I'm sure that's what it was. So my father spent a total of 21 months in captivity from May 1st, 1960 through February 10th of 1962. On February 10th of 62, my father is exchanged for Soviet spy Colonel Rudolph Abel. Abel is a master spy, a KGB colonel, smuggled into America through Canada, sets up shop in New York City. He's an artist, he's a photographer, he actually has some clients, but all the while he's being funded by the KGB to gather our military secrets and our nuclear secrets. He's running a spy ring. He makes a mistake. One of his hollowed nickels gets into circulation. A paper boy ends up with it. It opens up when he's counting his change at home. A piece of microfilm pops out, numeric code on it. His dad, the paper boy's dad, is a New York cop. That doesn't look right. Hands it over to the FBI. The FBI, young man, where did you get this nickel? I don't know. I delivered 100 papers last week. It could be anybody that gave me a nickel tip. So the FBI set up a sting operation. About a year to a year and a half it takes to identify Abel as the master spy. He's captured in the mid-50s, interrogated, put on trial, sentenced to 30 years in prison. He's serving that sentence when my father shot down on May 1st of 60. This is a photo here of the Glienicke Bridge in Potsdam, Germany. This is where the spy exchange takes place the morning of February 10th of 1962. A very famous sign in this photo, 4 different languages, you are leaving the American sector. Across that bridge is communism, East Germany. A cartoon, a political editorial political cartoon from February of 1962. Abel on one side, Powers on the other. They're across the Glienicke Bridge. The tagline that has been cut off, it says, "Peace through trade." and then one other photo of the bridge taken west to east. So you're looking into East Germany. Google says this is the spy exchange. It is not. Not everything on Google is correct. This was taken the same day, February 10th of 1962, but this photo was taken in the afternoon after the press broke. The spy exchange takes place at 9 in the morning, press breaks at noon, people go, hey, let's go look at the bridge. And that's when this photo is taken that afternoon. Rudolph Abel returns home a hero of the Soviet Union, a parade in his honor, a postage stamp in his likeness, some medals for his heroics. My father returns home to controversy. While he's in prison, there are editorials and newspaper articles being written saying that he defected, he landed the plane intact, he spilled his guts and told the Soviets everything he knew, or that he had not followed orders and committed suicide, all of which were part truths, mistruths, some innuendos, or outright lies of the time. Now, it is true that the CIA pilots were given the option of taking a quote-unquote suicide device with them on these missions, a poison pin hidden in a silver dollar worn around the neck as a good luck charm. It was explained to the pilots, if you're caught, you will be tortured. Here's a way to alleviate the pain and suffering. It's an optional device to take, an optional device to use, at the pilot's discretion, in the event of torture, not in the event of capture. But since Khrushchev comes up to center stage and goes, oh, look at these evil Americans. This is what they give their spy pilots to commit suicide with. This one wanted to live to see another day. From that moment on, in certain circles, and even within some circles in the government, people thought that Dad disobeyed orders. But again, there were no orders to begin with to use it or to take it. The orders, and I have to paraphrase, if capture appears imminent, pilots should take a cooperative attitude toward their captors. They are perfectly free to tell them about their mission of taking photos. They should not talk to them about the specifications of the airplane or the equipment on board. And my father followed his orders to a T. When my father gets home, he is debriefed by the CIA for 3 weeks at a safe house in Maryland. After 3 weeks of debriefings, the CIA realizes he did everything he was supposed to do. They clear him. He then gets to see his parents for the first time in 18 months. They attended the trial in Moscow back in 1960. After seeing his parents, on March 6th of 1962, he appears before a Senate Select Committee hearing, downtown Washington, D.C. Several of the senators you might recognize: Prescott Bush, Al Gore Sr., Dick Russell, which the House Office Building is named after, and even Barry Goldwater out of Arizona was on this committee that asked my dad a bunch of questions for about 2 hours on March 6th of 62. At the end of the session, they exonerate my father of any wrongdoing. He's been cleared by the CIA, exonerated by the US Senate, but not yet cleared by the court of public opinion because of the fake news of the time that was circulating in the press. My father did not care what other people thought he should or should not have done. He knew that what he did was the right thing to do under the circumstance he found himself in, and he was often quoted as saying he'd do the exact same things again, given the exact same set of circumstances. So my father gets on with his life. He's getting used to freedom back in America. He and his first wife Barbara, they divorce upon his return home. The marriage disintegrated while he was incarcerated. It was a rocky marriage from the beginning, but the notoriety, the press, the paparazzi following her around in the States, it just didn't do well for her. So the marriage falls apart. They divorce in '62. While he's working at the CIA for the next year, he's walking around a corridor. He bumps into a lovely young lady, spills his coffee down the front of her. I am so sorry, may I buy you another cup of coffee? How about lunch? How about dinner? Romance starts to ensue. And this young woman would eventually become my mom. They married in 1963 in Catlett, Virginia, when he was about to move out to LA, California. During the year he's with the CIA, between '62 and '63, he's training agents on what to do if captured, how to go through an interrogation, how to appear to cooperate, when in fact you're not giving the enemy any information of value. But you have to remember, Dad is a pilot. He wants to fly. This is all he ever wanted to do, was to fly airplanes. He's been cooped up in jail for 2 years, a desk job for about a year. He's a little stir crazy. He wants to fly again. The CIA, they can't use him. His cover's been blown. He cannot be a CIA pilot. The Air Force, U.S. Air Force, does not want to take him back into their ranks, because if they do hire him on as a pilot, they will be accused of employing spies. And the Air Force does not want that reputation. So Kelly Johnson from Lockheed Aircraft Corporation comes to the rescue. He offers Dad a job as a Lockheed test pilot. My father passes the mental and physical examinations. He signs on with Lockheed in 1963 when this photo was taken, a PR photo announcing that he's now working for Lockheed. My father works with Lockheed as a test pilot between 1963 and 1970. In 1970, this photo was taken. I'm a little 5-year-old kid, Dad and Mom, and my sister Dee in the background. My sister Dee is a half-sister, which I did not realize until I was like 20 years old, from my mom's first marriage. When Dad and Mom married, he adopted Dee right away. He wanted a family unit. And then I was born in LA, California in June of 1965. This photo was taken in 1970 in preparation for my father's book being published, Operation Overflight. His co-author on this book, Kurt Gentry. Kurt Gentry's next book after this you may have heard of, Helter Skelter. Dad is on the lecture circuit for about 2 years, between 1970 and 1972. He then gets a job with KGIL radio station in the San Fernando Valley. This is a picture of him reporting on news, weather, and traffic for KGIL. One of the things I want to point out is the bracelet on his right arm. I never really realized what that was until the picture was blown up. POW MIA bracelet. I remember going with my father in the 1970 to 72 time frame to POW and MIA rallies around Southern California. One of his friends, a fellow U-2 pilot, went back into the Air Force, gets shot down over Vietnam, ends up in the Hanoi Hilton. And I'm pretty sure that bracelet is in support of his friend. Dad works for KGIL between 1972 and 1976. In 1976, he gets a job with NBC Television, flying their helicopter, reporting on news, weather, and traffic for the evening news. He works with them for about 1.5 years, up until August 1st of 1977. He's coming back from Santa Barbara, California, reporting on brush fires in the area. He's getting closer to the airport. The helicopter runs out of gas. It crashes. He and the cameraman are killed in the accident. And this is about where I started the story. My father ends up being buried in Arlington National Cemetery. It took 2 weeks for him to get interned in Arlington National Cemetery. That is unheard of. It takes months to get interned into Arlington. But when President Jimmy Carter signs a proclamation to have him interned, a presidential signature at the bottom of the proclamation, things move a little quicker. So he passes in 77 and gets interned there 2 weeks later. My mother joined him there in June of 2004. So I've talked to you about the U-2 incident. I've talked to you about the truth of what I've uncovered during my research. What I want to end on is how the American government, after 40 and 50 years respectively, finally acknowledged Dad as a hero to our country. In June of '98, there was a declassification conference hosted by the CIA and the Air Force at the Fort Leslie J. McNair in downtown Washington, D.C. At this conference, 2 very important things were declassified about the U-2 program. First, the height at which Dad was shot down, 70,500 feet. There was no flameout, there was no descent, there was no sabotage, there was no pilot error. It was the near miss of a Soviet SA-2 missile that brought down the plane. The second thing that was declassified is that CIA, working hand in hand with the U.S. Air Force, could not be separated. For all intent and purposes, it was a military operation. Once that word military was declassified, that allowed the U.S. government to step up to the plate. May 1st of 2000, the 40th anniversary of the shootdown, the U.S. Air Force awards Dad posthumously the Distinguished Flying Cross. and the CIA awards him posthumously the Director's Medal for extreme fidelity and courage in the line of duty. Then, another 12 years later, June of 2012, at a ceremony at the Pentagon, the U.S. Air Force honors Dad posthumously by awarding him the Silver Star. So here's my son, Francis Gary Powers III, 10 years old at the time, accepting my father's medal, my dad's medal, on behalf of the family. My son is now 6'2". He's just graduated from James Madison University in Virginia with his master's in psychology. He's looking for work, so if anybody can help, please let us know. And we're very proud of what he's been able to accomplish. At his age, I had failed out of college. I was spinning my wheels in California. I did not know what I wanted to do, but when I moved to Virginia in '92, everything fell into place. I now have 2 master's degrees, one in public administration, nonprofit management, one in U.S. history. But he's so far ahead of me at that age, I'm just very, very proud of him. So we're also very honored, very humbled, very grateful to our nation for them awarding Dad posthumously the POW Medal, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and the Silver Star. It goes to show that it's never too late to set the record straight, and we're very glad that they were able to do so. So that pretty much concludes the formal remarks of today's talk. I'll end with this picture of the Silver Star as well as the certificate that accompanied it. The Silver Star is currently on display along with other U-2 artifacts that I've been able to collect over the years at the SAC Museum, Strategic Air Command and Aerospace Museum near Omaha, Nebraska. If anybody gets out that way, it's on not a permanent loan, but it's there for the foreseeable future. If anybody would like to see me in the Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, you can contact me through GaryPowers.com. If you're interested in learning more about the spy tours I operate, you can go to spytour.com. And if you want to learn more about the Cold War Museum, you can find them online at coldwar.org. So I'm a big thank you to KTOO, as well as to Bruce and the World Affairs Council for hosting this program tonight. I'll be glad to open this up for a Q&A for about 10 to 15 minutes, as long as we have for questions and answers. So thank you all very much for coming out to join me for about an hour. And what I think we have is a microphone. So if are there any questions, please come up to the mic and we can start that part of the program. There's a few. Wonderful.
This might be an easy one. Just a little more information about your research journey in terms of gaining as much knowledge as you've been able to pull together, obviously a lifetime, but also just government documents and how you, well, you live in the area, I guess, of Virginia and D.C., but if you could talk a little more about that, sure. I'd be interested.
So back in college, I started doing this research on my dad, going to the library, going through the periodicals of the Dewey Decimal System. Some of you might remember that. And trying to just find whatever I could. And then when I moved to Virginia, that's when things really helped to unfold. I wrote to the CIA. I asked them and introduced myself, Gary Powers Jr. I'm doing research on my father, trying to find out what he went through. Is there anything that you can provide that can assist in my research? They invited me into their corporate headquarters in McLean, Virginia. I was able to go into the HIC collection, H-I-C, Historical Intelligence Collection. That is their declassified section. Newspaper clippings, periodicals, books, manuscripts, and other stuff that is open source or declassified that they allowed me to photocopy and get copies of. I also did a FOIA request to the CIA, a Freedom of Information Act request. And I got this box in about 3 to 4 weeks full of documents and a videotape of the Inquisitive Angel, which was a black and white video of the development of the U-2 program that's been declassified. Going through the documents, a bunch of redactions. They provided me everything I didn't ask for. So I wanted my dad's debriefing transcripts. I wanted my dad's medical records. I wanted my dad's payroll records. I wanted to get his assignment records. Anything I could get to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I got a bunch of really good stuff, but really just nothing that I asked for. What other research? I was able to talk and meet people in the DC area, people who flew with my father, either in the military or in the U-2 program. I was able to talk to, of course, family members, my aunts and uncles who were alive at that time. I was able to go through and talk to some of his college classmates from Milligan College in Tennessee. So anywhere I could go to talk to or to take notes or to an interview, I did, including Germany and the Soviet Union. I went to Soviet Union in May of 1990, right after the Berlin Wall had fallen, but right before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Very interesting time. And when I went over to the Soviet Union that first time, I was invited through a news correspondent that was on exchange to America for NBC News in LA, where my father had worked. So I called the news reporter up, Svetlana. Hi, this is Gary Powers Jr. You may realize my dad worked where you're working now on this exchange. I very much like to visit the Soviet Union. And so she was able to help arrange that. When I get to the Soviet Union, I want to see the U-2 wreckage. I know it's there on display somewhere in a museum, but nobody I talked to, including my hosts, knew where the wreckage was. Okay, so I did not see the U-2 wreckage. I wanted to see the May Day parade, but instead they took me off to the dachas in the countryside to see a nice, spend a nice, pleasant afternoon. And I come to find out afterwards that the reason I wasn't able to get to the May Day parade because of glasnost and perestroika, the demonstrations that were taking place. They didn't want me to see. So that was the first time I went to Moscow. The second time was 1997, so we're about 6 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. I'm going on a spy tour of Moscow, arranged by retirees of CIA, FBI, Northwest Mounted Police, NSA, and a few other agencies, and including the KGB. And so we get over to Moscow, we go on a tour bus, we see drop points and safe houses, we go by the entrance to the KGB headquarters. We have Oleg and Ivan, who are retired KGB officers, who are giving us talks and joining us with dinner, talking about the good old days. Some of the people that are in this group would do the cat and mouse chasing in DC when they were assigned to the Russian embassy, or the American embassy, the Russian embassy in the DC area. And so it was very interesting to see these people doing vodka shots. I was at this intersection, this is where we lost you, this is where we picked you up again, and they were just reminiscing about the good old days. So that was very interesting. And 2 other times I went, the last time was in December of 2017 doing research for my book, Spy Pilot. And the one prior to that would have been in 2010, the 50th anniversary of the U-2 shootdown. I was invited to go over, give a talk at the Central Armed Forces Museum, which is where the U-2 wreckage is housed. So I was able to go to these places, interview these people, take notes, all of which eventually, some of which eventually ended up in the book, Spy Pilot. Yes, sir.
Okay. When you did your research and while your father was in the Soviet prison, who was leading the charge of misinformation against him? Like, was McCarthyism still present as part of the issue, or?
So I guess the question comes down to how did the rumors and speculation and misinformation start and get circulated, and how did it all evolve? Who was saying what? And did it tie into McCarthyism? And I'm going to say no, it did not tie into McCarthyism, which was throughout the mid to late 50s. There is some residue of that, of course, but it wasn't direct correlation. I am one of the examples. Eisenhower, Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, and Kelly Johnson, all three, Kelly Johnson, the designer of the U-2 plane, all 3 of those individuals in June of 1960 at 3 different events, as if on script, and I do think it was on script, all said the most likely reason that the Powers U-2 was shot down is that he had a flame out and descended to a lower altitude, or a MiG or a missile hit the plane. And that's because the American government could not bring themselves to believe that the Soviets could reach that altitude. Our missiles didn't go that high. If our missiles don't go that high, theirs can't. We're better than them. We're ahead of them. Cold War mentality. October 27th, 1962, the last day of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Major Rudolph Anderson is shot down in a U-2 over Cuba. He dies in that shootdown. The shootdown, an SA-2 missile, the second U-2 to be shot down. The CIA folks, the second plane's been shot down. Wow, Powers was telling the truth. We now have verification. So it took another U-2 to be shot down before they really actually believed. And as a result, there were 5 more U-2s shot down over mainland China during the 1960s. You can Google that and find out more information about that. That's open source. I'm not giving away any secrets. It's just not widely known. Other people, armchair generals is what I like to call them. He should have done this. He should have done that. If it was me, I would have done it this way. Well, they weren't there. But still, senators, congressmen, a local press, all had opinions on what Dad should or should not have done. And as a result, this misinformation circulated around, including the Soviet Union released some stuff, that he was seen drinking Russian vodka at a bar after landing the plane. Oh, and the best one, an encounter with a UFO is what brought down the plane. It's just, now today with all the UFO reveals, hey, you never know. But it just goes from plausible and believable to absurd. Yes?
Thanks, Gary. I did get to go to the Soviet Union for a while when the Cold War was still going on. In 1984, I spent the summer there learning Russian, and mostly in Moscow and in Leningrad. And they did also take us to the main military museum where I saw your dad's plane wreckage there. So if you'd asked me, I could have told you. But I'm curious, though, if you how, and I remember the display. You know, it was a pretty big propaganda ploy still, even then in the 80s. You know, it was a fairly big display with a lot of photos and things on there and showing that. And it wasn't just your dad's plane. Everything was like, look what the Americans are trying to screw us over in the world. I'm curious if that's changed now, like today or maybe in the mid-90s when there was a bit of a thaw, if the Russians' message about what happened has evolved.
Okay, I don't think I have to repeat the question. I think everybody's heard it. When the Soviet Union collapsed and Yeltsin came into power, there was about a 2-year time period where the Soviet archives opened up. There were some researchers from America that were able to go over and get information out of the archives. One of them, Naftali, and I don't know his last name, wrote a book with a Russian counterpart called Khrushchev's Cold War that got information out of the archives and also that pertained to the U-2 incident, and it was really good information. But then Putin follows Yeltsin. And Putin is hardcore KGB communist, and he just shuts everything down and puts a lock on the archives again. And you can now see over the last 30 years what's happened with his administration. Under Yeltsin, I thought there would have been more of a chance for peaceful coexistence and working together. Russia was invited to join the UN after the Soviet Union collapsed, and they said no. And then Putin, of course, with his upbringing through the KGB, thought that the worst thing that ever happened to the Soviet Union was losing the Cold War. And now you see what's going on. So I don't think there's any chance in the relatively near future for that to change.
How did your father speak about this when you were growing up?
How did he speak about this when I was growing up? Dad was a relatively shy individual. He hated public speaking, but was forced to do it. I have his note cards from his lecture that I've seen and have in my collection. He would talk to me. I'd just ask him questions. One of the questions I would always ask my dad, I was 10 years old. Dad, how high were you flying on May 1st? And he'd go, well, Gary, I can't tell you that. Well, why not? Well, if I tell you and you tell your friends and the friends tell their parents, I could be putting other pilots, other planes in harm's way. But Dad, you can trust me. I'm your son. And so I'd pester him every day. And one day, ran up to him when he came into the door from work. Dad, how high were you flying on May 1st? Kind of scowls at me. I wasn't flying high enough that day. Go to bed. So I remember that type of a question. I remember asking him questions about what it was like to be interrogated. and how he got through that ordeal. And one of those stories is in regards to a dream he had in prison, where he's dreaming that he's walking with his family, his mom and dad and a sister or two, down the country road on the family farm. And then something happens with his leg and there's a pain. And the family keeps walking and he can't keep up. And he wakes up from this dream with one of the metal pieces of the cot poking into his leg. So I remember that story that he told me. So he just dealt with it very well. With me, he'd answer my questions. I'm a kid though, so my mentality, I would love to ask him questions now. But there's just no way to do that. And so we're running down to about 30 seconds. So once again, a big thank you to Bruce, the Juneau World Affairs Council, as well as the station KTOO for hosting this event, and for you from Juneau coming out today to spend about an hour with me to learn about Cold War history, Gary Powers, and the U-2 incident. Thank you all very, very much.
That was Francis Gary Powers, Jr. in this Juneau World Affairs Council presentation, produced in collaboration with KTOO. It was recorded June 25, 2026 at KTOO in Juneau. JWAC presentations are supported by season sponsors, Core Alaska Kensington Mine, Wastman & Associates, Ramada Inn, and Jim Clark.